The day of the business meeting had arrived. "Hi, I'm Julia from DRS Factory. Is John available? We have a meeting scheduled today." As I was returning to my office from an errand, I heard a woman's voice as I passed by the front desk. Instinctively, I turned around. There stood a woman with smooth skin, chestnut-colored long hair, and a great figure. I had spoken to her on the phone yesterday, but seeing her in person, I couldn't help but stare. This must be Julia, the representative. Julia noticed my gaze and looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression. "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm John, the person in charge. Thank you for coming today. This way, please," I hurriedly said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the nerves. "Oh, so you're John. Nice to meet you, I'm Julia. I'm looking forward to our meeting today," Julia replied, looking straight into my eyes. Her large, bright eyes and well-defined features. There was no doubt she was a beauty. My heart raced and I felt embarrassed. I tried to look away from her face, but then thought, wait, she looks familiar. And found myself staring at her again. Then, at what an unlucky timing, our CEO, Mr. Smith, walked by at just such a moment. "Whoa, you're staring too much, just because your business partner was a very beautiful woman," Mr. Smith joked, catching me off guard. I felt even more embarrassed and looked down, avoiding Julia's eyes. Mr. Smith then said, "Oh," and started walking toward Julia and me. "My name is John. I work at a company that designs packaging for products sold on the market. I'm a 30-year-old single man. John, I heard you lost a new client contract recently. This is why we can't trust a low-educated like you with important work. You can only clean, serve coffee, and photocopy documents, so hurry up and make me a cup of coffee. The stronger the better." Since this morning, my boss, Robert, had been shouting at me. Robert is notorious for being mean to his subordinates and especially looks down on those with less education. As a high school graduate, I often bear the brunt of his harsh words. Robert didn't have to say it like that. "Don't worry about it, John. And it wasn't your fault the new contract fell through. You did great bringing in a new client. The one who ruined it was none other than Robert. He was disliked by Mr. Davis. Since Mr. Davis is the president of the client company, that's why we lost the contract. I'll talk to him about this later." My senior colleague, Thomas, encouraged me. Thomas always helped me out when Robert gave me a hard time. Robert constantly berated me, calling me incompetent. Even when I successfully brought in new clients or secured meetings, he would find some excuse to reassign me to menial tasks. Once again, Robert singled me out and dumped more menial work on me. Thomas always backed me up, somehow managing to get me assigned to client accounts again. But it was a never-ending cycle of being demoted to menial tasks by Robert. As long as Robert is my boss, there's no hope for my promotion. I'll be stuck as an entry-level employee, unable to escape menial tasks. "John, can I talk to you for a moment?" One day, Thomas called me over. "The other day, your junior, Alex, did some cold calling at a cosmetics company called DRS Factory. They're interested in doing business with us. So we need someone skilled to handle the negotiations. Since Alex is still inexperienced, John, we want you to take on this responsibility." I was surprised. "Are you sure it's okay for me to handle such an important meeting? I haven't been in charge of any clients recently because, well, Robert reassigned me. I don't have much experience and lack confidence," I replied, feeling hesitant. Thomas smiled and said, "Don't underestimate yourself. I remember when you secured a contract with a new client before. You have great sales skills. The feedback from clients you've handled has been positive. Believe in yourself. I've already convinced Robert to let you handle this, so you won't be reassigned. I'm counting on you." With that, Thomas smiled and said, "I have an errand to run now, so I'll be out for a while." And left. Left alone in the office, I felt a bit confused but decided not to waste the chance Thomas gave me. I got the details from Alex about DRS Factory and quickly scheduled a meeting for the next day. "Okay, I'll do my best." I motivated myself, determined to make the most of this opportunity. But just as I was feeling good and confident, I ran into Robert in the hallway. "Hey! Don't get cocky just because you got assigned a client. If you fail to secure this contract, you're fired," he snarled as he walked past. His constant negativity was disheartening, but I couldn't let it get to me. I refocused and prepared for the next day. And so, the day of the meeting arrived. "Hi, I'm Julia from DRS Factory. Is John available? We have a meeting scheduled today." As I was returning to my office from an errand, I heard a woman's voice as I passed by the front desk. Instinctively, I turned around. There stood a woman with smooth skin, chestnut-colored long hair, a fair complexion, and a great figure. I had spoken to her on the phone yesterday, but seeing her in person, I couldn't help but stare. She noticed my gaze and looked at me with a slightly curious face. "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm John, the person in charge. Thank you for coming today. This way, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my nerves. "Oh, so you're John. Nice to meet you, I'm Julia. I'm looking forward to our meeting today," Julia replied, looking straight into my eyes. Her large, bright eyes and well-defined features. She was undeniably beautiful. My heart raced and I felt embarrassed. I tried to look away from her face but then thought, she looks familiar. And found myself staring again. Just then, as if on cue, our CEO, Mr. Smith, walked by. "Whoa, you're staring too much just because your business partner was a very beautiful woman," Mr. Smith joked, catching me off guard. I felt even more embarrassed and looked down, avoiding Julia's eyes. Mr. Smith then said, "Oh," and started walking toward Julia and me. "Julia, is that really you? You've grown so much. How old are you now? You've become quite a beauty," he said. I was confused by the situation. "Uncle Ted. I can't believe I'm running into you here. I'm 28 now. I had no idea K&DO Corporation was your company. I had heard of a design firm but didn't know it was yours," Julia exclaimed, addressing Mr. Smith. "Uncle." Noticing my confusion, Mr. Smith explained. "Sorry about that. She is my niece, my sister's daughter, so we have different last names. I haven't seen her since she was in middle school, about 15 years ago. It's quite a surprise to see her all grown up." Mr. Smith laughed heartily. Seeing him laugh and looking at Julia, I understood. When I first saw Julia and thought she looked familiar, it was because she was Mr. Smith's niece. It's not unusual for an uncle and niece to resemble each other. I see. When I first met Julia, I thought she looked familiar. I never imagined it was because she resembles you, Mr. Smith, I said honestly. Julia laughed. "Really? Do I really look like Uncle Ted? It's the first time I've heard that." Mr. Smith chuckled. "I was quite the handsome guy in my younger days, so she must take after me." His good-natured humor lightened the mood. "Well, I'll leave the meeting to you. Even though she's my niece, make sure to prioritize our company's interests, right, John?" Mr. Smith said, patting my shoulder before heading to his office upstairs. I recomposed myself and led Julia to the meeting room. "Sorry about the mix-up. Let's start fresh. Nice to meet you," Julia said, slightly embarrassed, handing me her business card, to which I responded with mine. That day, we reviewed samples and brochures of her company's cosmetics and discussed the possibility of my company handling their packaging design. The meeting went well, and Julia seemed even more interested in doing business with us, so we ended the day on a positive note, considering the contract favorably. A few days later, Julia came back for a second meeting. This time, the receptionist guided her to the meeting room, and I received an internal call to join her there. Julia had her hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked stunning. I almost said it out loud, but I kept it to myself, not wanting to sound weird. The second meeting also went smoothly, and it was nearly certain we'd finalize the contract. I mentally celebrated my success. "Well, I'll confirm the delivery schedule and get back to you," I said, concluding the meeting. Julia then said, "This is unrelated, but after we first met, I told my mom about you. when I mentioned that we were meeting at Ted's company. She asked about you and recognized your name from your business card. I was surprised. Your mother knows me? I asked. Not understanding the situation, Julia explained, yes, she saw your name and said, isn't that Johnny? I was flustered. She called me Johnny. Does that mean she knew me from my childhood? John, did you know Uncle Ted's family when you were a kid? Oh, I mean, Mr. Smith, sorry for calling him that. Julia said, looking a bit embarrassed, sorry about that. Yes, I did know the Smith family when I was a child. However, I don't remember meeting Mr. Smith's sister, your mother. I apologize for that. I apologized in return, I'm sorry as well. Julia quickly followed up, no. It's perfectly normal to forget the adults you met as a child. Taking advantage of this topic, I shared a bit about my childhood with Julia. For me, Mr. Smith was originally my classmate's father. The Smith family and my family were neighbors, and Mr. Smith's eldest son, James, and I were classmates and good friends. My mother and James's mother, Mr. Smith's wife, were also good friends. My father passed away from an illness when I was young, so it was just my mother and me. The Smith family often looked out for us, inviting us to barbecues and outings. We had a close relationship. As I explained this, Julia added, my mother mentioned that she often saw you at the Smith house when she visited Uncle Ted. She remembered you playing with James. She even talked with your mother a few times. I apologize for not remembering your mother from back then. I was so focused on playing with James and the other kids, I said. Amazed by the coincidence. I then told Julia about how my relationship with the Smith family changed during and after middle school. As you might know, James went to study abroad in Italy during middle school. He loved it there and has been living in Italy ever since. Mr. Smith and his wife supported his decision and funded his stay. Now that he's an adult, he's running his own business there and doing well. Julia's eyes lit up. Yes, my mom told me about James. It's amazing that he's doing so well in Italy. I really respect him for that. However, she seemed to notice my slight change in expression. Is there something you're not telling me? She asked. I hesitated but decided to share. Well, since it's a family matter, I'm not sure if I should be the one to talk about it. However, Mr. Smith has been a huge help in my life, and I feel it's important to be open. I continued, when James went abroad, Mr. Smith was quite lonely. He used to teach us how to split wood, start fires, and do DIY projects. He enjoyed sharing these experiences with us. Since I lost my father when I was young, Mr. Smith became a father figure to me. After James left, Mr. Smith paid even more attention to me. During my teenage years, I drifted away due to typical teenage issues. But when I struggled to find stable employment after high school, Mr. Smith offered me a job here. That was when I was 25. Julia listened attentively, nodding. She then said, I'm so glad you were there for Uncle Ted. I didn't know all this, but I'm grateful you shared it. It's amazing to have such a connection with a business partner. I'm really happy we met. I was so flattered by her words that I felt my face turning red. Actually, I was probably already blushing. Trying to stay professional, I replied, I'm sorry for sharing so much personal history. I'll follow up with you about the delivery schedule soon. Julia responded formally, I look forward to it. We both left the meeting room, and as we did, we ran into Robert. He glared at Julia and me. Julia, unaware that Robert was my boss, politely greeted him. Robert responded, Are you John's client? Nice to meet you too, and handed Julia his business card. I'm sorry you have to deal with someone as incompetent as John. If there are any issues, please contact me directly. I don't know why Mr. Smith keeps someone with such a low education level in our company, he muttered. Julia reluctantly gave him her business card in return. After Robert walked away, Julia said, That man, he said he's a manager? He seemed very unpleasant. Are you okay? I reassured her, Oh, I'm used to it. He always looks down on me, but it's fine. I escorted her to the exit, saying, I'll be in touch about the delivery schedule. The next day. Our contract with DRS Factory was officially finalized, and I passed the project to the design team. I felt a bit sad that I wouldn't be in contact with Julia until the delivery date, but was thrilled the deal went through. I was grateful for Julia being such a good person and the unexpected connection we had. Thanks to Thomas, I also got more responsibilities with new clients, keeping me busy. 1 week later, I was suddenly called to meet with Mark, Robert's superior. Have I done something wrong? I anxiously approached Mark's desk. Sorry to call you out of the blue. We've had some sudden personnel changes. Mark said. I see. A personnel change? My heart pounded as I wondered where I might be reassigned. Yes. Dismissal effective today. Mark said bluntly. What? I was shocked and felt like my heart would leap out of my chest. Dismissal, effective today? I repeated his words in disbelief. Yes. Mark confirmed. I mustered the courage to ask, was there a complaint? As I said that, a thought struck me. Could it be that I made a mistake by talking about my childhood and family with Julia during the business meeting? But Julia didn't seem upset, and the meeting ended on a positive note. Wait a minute. I ran into Robert right after the meeting with Julia. He must have reported something negative about me to the higher-ups. That must be it. These thoughts raced through my mind. Well, something like that. Mark responded. He then continued, so Robert will be replaced by Thomas, who will be promoted to manager. And as for the assistant manager position, we think you're the right person for it. What? My exclamation came out in a strange pitch again. I couldn't grasp the situation. I'm being fired, yet I'm the right person for a promotion? Wait, am I being fired or promoted? When I said that, Mark looked puzzled and replied, what? Then he started chuckling. Sorry. I completely left out the subject. I'm a terrible boss. My apologies. The one being fired is Robert. Robert is out. Thomas is the new manager, and you are being promoted to assistant manager. I was stunned. Me, an assistant manager. That's right. Can I count on you? Actually, it's already decided, so do your best. Mark said with a grin. I was taken aback by the sudden promotion and Robert's dismissal. As I returned to my desk in a daze, Thomas was waiting for me. John, congratulations on your promotion. Well, for both of us. Let's do our best together. Thomas, now the new manager, put his arm around my shoulder. Yes. I'll do my best. I was thrilled that Thomas, a senior I respected, would be replacing Robert. But why did this sudden change happen? I asked Thomas. Do you know why Robert was fired? Thomas replied, I'm not sure about all the details, but Mark mentioned that Mr. Smith suddenly decided Robert couldn't be trusted anymore. Robert's bad attitude and behavior probably caught up with him. I had no way of knowing the full story. But it was a relief not to deal with Robert's constant negativity anymore. The entire office seemed to breathe a sigh of relief without Robert's toxic presence. About 6 months passed. I found fulfillment in my new role as assistant manager. The collaboration with Thomas was going well, leading to improved company performance. Our deal with DRS Factory, the first project I managed, was a success. They were impressed with our design work and wanted to continue working with us, increasing the volume of business. With my promotion, the responsibility for DRS Factory was handed over to my junior, Alex, which meant I no longer interacted directly with Julia. One day, as I was finishing work and leaving the office, I saw Mr. Smith coming down from the upper floor, talking to someone. I greeted him, good evening, and was about to exit the building when he called out, John. When I turned, the man next to Mr. Smith looked at me with wide eyes and said, John. Is that really you? It's been so long. The tall man with a slight tan sparked a flood of memories. It was James, Mr. Smith's eldest son. I immediately recognized his familiar features. James. You're back from Italy? I was thrilled. We hadn't seen each other since middle school, over 15 years ago. I had some downtime at work, so I came back for a short visit. I just landed at the airport, but since my dad's office is closer than home, I stopped by here first. James said. Your mom's been missing you more than I have, so you better head home soon. Mr. Smith said, pointing at his son, but his face showed how happy he was. He must have been delighted to see his son after such a long time. We're having a welcome home dinner for him tomorrow night at this restaurant. If you're free, join us, Mr. Smith said, handing me a flyer for a restaurant in a Manhattan high-rise. I'd love to. It sounds like a great chance to catch up with James. I was thrilled. Then, see you tomorrow, Mr. Smith said with a smile as he left with James. Feeling warm inside, I headed home. The next day, I went to the restaurant Mr. Smith mentioned and told the staff at the entrance that I was there for the Smith family. They led me to a large room labeled Smith family. Johnny. Long time no see. James's mother greeted me warmly as I entered. James, looking a bit embarrassed, said, honestly, this dinner is my mom's idea. I wish she wouldn't make such a big deal about my return. Well, you left for Italy when you were 14. Everyone missed you, including me, I replied, chuckling. At the dinner were Mr. and Mrs. Smith, James's sister Lily, an older man who introduced himself as James's uncle, and a cousin around our age. I felt a bit out of place among the Smith family, but Mrs. Smith quickly reassured me, Johnny, you're like family to us. There's still my aunt and cousin to come, James told me. I thought about how James was so well loved by his relatives. Then it hit me. James's aunt and cousin. As soon as I murmured that, a woman's voice said, sorry we're late. I turned to see an older woman and a young woman entering the room. The younger woman and I locked eyes immediately. John, she called out. It was Julia, the representative from DRS Factory. It had been 6 months since we last saw each other after I handed over the account. Julia works with our company. John is our assistant manager, so they know each other from work, Mr. Smith quickly explained to everyone. Julia's mother greeted me, you must be Johnny. Julia has told me about you. Thank you for all your help. I responded, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for your support, handing her my business card. Let's keep it casual tonight, Mr. Smith said. The dinner started, and we shared stories about Italy and caught up on what we missed. Julia often spoke to me, and we had a good conversation. Then I learned a surprising fact. I told Julia about how I became assistant manager after Robert was suddenly fired and that I had to hand over the DRS Factory account to Alex. Just then, Mr. Smith joined our conversation. Julia was furious that day. She called me, angry, after her meeting with John, saying she met Robert in the hallway and he was incredibly rude. She said, how can you keep someone like him in charge? You need to rethink your priorities. She really gave me an earful, Mr. Smith said. Julia turned bright red. Ted. I told you not to tell John that, she exclaimed. I was taken aback. So that's what happened. I can't believe it was thanks to Julia that Robert got fired. Thomas became the manager, the work environment improved, and everyone is now happier. Thank you so much. I thanked Julia sincerely. Julia's mother, Linda, chimed in, Ted, are you just following Julia's orders? Is that really okay? Don't get the wrong idea. I was already considering what to do about Robert, but Julia's call pushed me to make the decision. It was my judgment in the end. Mr. Smith laughed. Regardless, I realized how much Julia had helped and how Mr. Smith valued us. On the way home, Julia asked for my personal contact information instead of my work details, and we exchanged numbers. Julia was a wonderful, attractive woman, and I was already drawn to her. When she reached out and asked me on a date, I was over the moon. And so, what started as a chance meeting turned into something much more meaningful. However, as an employee at Mr. Smith's company, I felt it was presumptuous and awkward to consider developing a romantic relationship with Julia. Especially since she was Mr. Smith's niece. Despite my reservations, Mr. Smith would frequently ask, how are things going with Julia, whenever he saw me at work. James also messaged me from Italy, saying, if you and Julia get married, I'll be happy to be your relative. To top it all off, Julia's mother, Linda, told her, bring John over to our house. I'll cook for you both. Julia passed this on to me. With the Smith family's encouragement, my relationship with Julia blossomed into a romance, and 2 years later, we got married. My work was going well, and I was extremely happy. I heard through the grapevine that Robert was now working as an employee at one of our client companies. According to one of our employees who saw him, he had mellowed out and was quietly working hard. On weekends, my mother would often say, "Julia? I'm going shopping with Julia's mom. Do you want to come along?" Yes. I'd love to. My wife, Julia, would happily join them. My mother and Julia's mother were originally good friends, and they were thrilled to become relatives through our marriage. The two moms and Julia often went shopping together. Life was peaceful and happy. Reflecting on it, I realized life is full of connections. I felt deeply grateful for the many wonderful connections in my life. Determined to give back to those around me, I focused on creating a workplace where my subordinates could find fulfillment and on building a happy home with my beloved wife.